All right, welcome to What Are the Odds with Barnes and Baris. I'm one half of the show. All right, Rich Baris, People's Pundit. Don't forget, if you like the videos, to like them and share them far and wide. Barnes will be here shortly. Give him some time. Give him some time. All right, it's his belated. What's the phrase we were talking about again? The belated victory lap that Barnes is entitled to and has not obviously been able to give. All right. What I want to focus on, of course, is obviously Barnes and I, you as always, have tried to steer you in the direction we think is the important thing for each election for you to focus on. Sometimes we do better jobs than others, right? But I like to think we're never just totally lost in the sauce. Same thing is true with Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit, which is, by the way, noon, in case you don't watch that. And I think that it's important to watch the media and Democrats and how they react, because this is like Trump incoming, man. Okay, we'll go over some of the picks, what he intends to do if Republicans want to play the games that they play. Which, by the way, we'll explain to you why it is they're playing them. Laura and I had a really good conversation about this, how to try to explain this to you guys. Like, why is it that Republicans will not hold up? For instance, a Democratic nominee who refuses to identify the difference between a man and a woman for the Supreme Court. She's supposed to interpret the U.S. Constitution and all the laws on the books, but she doesn't know the difference between a penis and a vagina. Or at least she wouldn't acknowledge there's a difference. Lindsey Graham has no problem with that. Of course he wouldn't, right? And then, of course, we have others. We have, for instance, Lloyd Austin, Secretary of Defense. This is a man who has on multiple occasions publicly stated that he does not support the most fundamental American tenet probably ever, considering how much the Quartering Act bothered our founding fathers and how much the idea of redcoats being all over the city all the time bothered our founding fathers. And that, of course, is civilian control of the U.S. military. Lloyd Austin doesn't believe in civilian control of the U.S. military, yet he is the Secretary of Defense. No objections. And we have a chief diplomat, Secretary of State in Tony Blinken, who has never advocated for statecraft a day in his life. He has always advocated for war and for conflict. So where are we at because of all of this, by the way? We're at an escalating conflict in the Middle East between Israel and Palestine and the Palestinians and the Arab world, even though Trump was able to isolate the Palestinians from the rest of the Arab world. We had the Abraham Accords when he left. And of course, we have a conflict in the Russo-Ukrainian war that absolutely could result in World War III. You may and may not have heard that the Biden administration gave the okay to the Ukrainians to use long-range missiles, which they got from us, of course, to strike Russian targets. That represents a significant escalation in this conflict. And if they start hitting Russian targets in Russia, especially in high population centers, this will get even worse. Trump responded to it because it's that bad. He knows how bad this is. So he actually responded. He put out a video recently, which I'm going to show you guys. But before we do, we have to welcome the man back. All right. Look, this is probably not easy for him to do. So welcome back, Robert. I hope, I hope you're feeling better, my friend. You deserve a belated victory lap. Everybody's been looking forward to seeing you. How you feeling?
Surviving.
Yeah, man. And I really do appreciate that. You doing this today. I probably would have stayed my ass in bed. I'm just not gonna lie. I'm gonna tell you all. I'd be like, you all can wait another week. I'm going to sleep. So, what are your thoughts here overall? I mean, I've thought today, of course, we take like the bit of a victory lap because we haven't been on since the election, but also, like, I'm sure you're watching all of these people, and I got all these clips you can see loaded up down below that I'm going to play. Like, they are, when you hear them, Robert, say like, oh yeah, I get it, or this, they're full of shit. And that includes Democrats, that includes the media, that includes Republicans. They're just trying to survive this. Speaking of survival, they're full of it. And I got some choice little clips I want to play people to demonstrate that they are in fact full of it. So what's your take?
Well, I mean, I think there was one of my favorite takeaways from that some the different analysts had was that 2024 was a verdict on 2020 as much as it was 2024, and that the Democratic narrative was that 2016 was a one-off for all these weird, exceptional, unusual reasons.
Yeah.
And then when Trump lost in 2020, that's the norm to them.
Yeah.
And so the idea that Trump could come back and win was something that most of them had difficulty accepting as a possibility, even though, we've been talking about it for a while. And that this revolution on, this November 2024 combined two different populist counter currents. One is the older industrial, old school working class. People worked in defense plants.
Yeah.
I think of like Steve Bannon's types, his community, those kind of places. But they're older, more boomerish in terms of generation. Wanting to get away and get away from the Bushite republicanism and back to what they understood as prairie republicanism, which they understood Reagan to be. You had that group, which Trump had brought on board. He brought the Tea Party back home to the Republican brand, particularly his brand, but the Republicans benefited from it down ballot all over the place. We'll talk about that as one of the interesting, how much that continues to change will be an interesting thing.
Yeah, it will.
As a variable, because it continues to in some weird ways. But you have that old industrial working class group. Now we've been talking about it for 2 years, a young working class democratically oriented group that was divorcing from the Democratic Party. Disproportionately men, disproportionately minority, but not exclusively or even majority so. So this applied to certain non-college white men as much as anybody else that would happen to be a millennial or a Zoomer. That age reach was the entire predicate, aside from the idea that Hispanics will always vote the way that their great-grandparent would have voted based on who let them in or didn't let them in. Putting that Democratic myth aside, the other big one was we're going to have young people for forever. We have millennials and we have a generational shift. And instead, what they were missing was what, Robert Kennedy Sr. signified in 1968 and the Robert Kennedy Jr. now signifies in 2024, or personifies, you could say, an individual human form, these two political rebellious streaks. And they came together and put Trump over the top. Some places helped Republicans down ballot. Some places didn't help Republicans down ballot. The ability to rely upon that is now, more and more hit or miss. The money guys kind of get rewarded because even though they wasted money on states they shouldn't have, they never get really punished for that. They get punished if they help a Kerry Lake win on election night. That's there's still all those flaws, institutional flaws, very much still present. But what was interesting is what we've been talking about for a decade. And we're both friends with Sean Trendy. Sean started covering him, and to be honest with you, I thought he could keep covering him. The Ohio State, I don't think prohibits you from covering it. But I thought he was onto something with the lost majority about what happened between 2008 and 2012 was mostly who didn't vote, not who did.
Yeah.
Here, I mean, it was to the point where we not only predicted these seismic underlying tectonic shifts that were that in real time, at 3 months, 6 months, a year, some cases, 2 years, some cases. Ahead of where everyone else was. But, we got, even the number right. Because the other issue of 2020 was, my thesis was, could they get enough mail-in votes to overcome a lack of natural enthusiasm for Joe Biden? The answer was yes. However, that you came by that. For those of us who had doubted how real they were, well, don't we have a little more proof now? I mean, for those that don't remember, back in 2020 predicted it would be 75 million for Trump, 75 to somewhere in that right above below for Biden, and then rest spread third parties, independents. About 6 more million people voted. And
Well,
I thought would happen. And the census agreed. The census came back, of course, a year later, and found for the first time ever overvoting in certain places that or undervoting in ways that they never people just don't do. And so I think everything we've been talking about has now come to fruition, and it's seen its full expression. And we're now kind of in Act 2 of what comes into this and what leads to the rest of it. It's kind of weird that you had like a sequel in one film, but that feels what part of what Trump's first whole term till now it was one long first act with multiple crises built throughout the entire structure in ways you could have almost not sold in a believable narrative if you were putting it out as a Hollywood script.
Yeah, man. I mean, Sean and not Sean, Scott Adams been talking about this. Like, it's kind of hard to peg Act 1, 2, 3 with Trump because of just the unconventional nature of this story. But you had said before, how long we've been discussing this. Somebody sent me before, it was last week. Somebody sent me a video of us, and it was before the primary really even started to heat up. Some of the polls still had some of the polls were pulling the bullshit they were pulling, like WPA Intel, Chris Wilson, who took money from DeSantis to all of them did, right? And while you and I were on the show talking about younger generation, talking about Hispanics, especially Hispanic men, talking about how that in 2020 you could actually see these trends. It's just because Trump lost that we didn't really discuss them. Like, not we did, but other people didn't. And that, this was like months before the first votes were cast in the primary for the Republican nomination. And people were, you got to remember, folks, if you were watching us back then, like, people were mocking the shit out of us for it. We were even showing people how it's not just my polling, it was other polling, but they were doing these weights where they could really try to get to the result they wanted, somehow showing these 4 to 8 point swings to Trump overall. And beneath the surface of those swings, you could see massive swings with different people that Barnes and I were highlighting. But the way they were weighting was causing it to get the result they wanted. And then Chris and others would argue that what we were showing was just a mirage. That was the word he kept using. It's just a mirage. It's a polling mirage. Trump support isn't that much. And Barnes and I were repeatedly saying, look, dummy, these people are saying they voted for Biden in 2020. They're telling us this. This isn't a mirage. We know they are mind changers. They changed their minds, and nobody wanted to hear it. And I just want to tell people this because not everybody really knows this, but I polled Nevada, maybe a month before the election, right? And I know the state, so I was kind of concerned with the result. It was for our project, so we talked about it, but I didn't release it publicly. But I was concerned about it because I saw a few things. One is that Trump was actually edging out Harris by a point, 2 points with Hispanics, but also the Asian vote. This thing was Trump +3, and I'm like, this cannot be right. This can't be right. But Barnes was like, it's right. It's right. It's right. And he had been saying that for a long time. So it made me feel comfortable to give it to the client. Look, this is it. This is not what you're going to see in public polling, but I'm telling you, this is right. He was basically tied in Clark County. He was up in Washoe. He was dominating everywhere. The only reason why we were a Trump +2, he won, and I think he's still ahead by 3. The only reason why the difference between that 1 and 3 is that the rurals voted. Oh, it is 3.1. The rurals voted in higher share than I thought. And he did better with Asians in Washoe than even I was polling, which Robert was saying that's where it's going to happen. It's going to be in Washoe. It's going to be in all these because we know we do specific subgroups for ethnic identity. So, Vietnamese, Korean, right? We were asking this and we could see it, and it was absolutely happening. And Trump, by the way, folks, he did win Native Americans overall nationwide. He won them. He clapped her with them 65 to 35. If you look at and let me just bring this up real quick. Where's the 2024? I want to go to Nevada and just give people that number because I know that's like one of these. Whoops, that's Michigan. I know that's one of those states where it was just like crazy to think that this would happen, but it did. So other racial ethnic groups actually were Harris +4, but when you separate Asian, Trump beat her 50 to 47. And according to the exit polls, he tied among Latinos and he got 17% of the black vote in the state of Nevada. We had him at 19%, 18.7. So it's like the mirage. They were just so full of shit. And now you have the media like struggling to figure out, actually, let's start with the Democrats. Because I saw you retweeted this video and I was like, oh, that's going on the show today. Because I think you probably are thinking the same thing I'm thinking. This not only tells you where Democrats are, but in their minds, the donors, but it tells you where they're not. And that is in the place where they have realized what they have done wrong and they are willing to acknowledge what they have done wrong. They still think in their minds they should have been able to buy you off. Watch, listen, I'm going to shut up and I'm going to let Mark explain it and we'll talk about it after it's done. It's only like a minute and a half.
Story in Politico about the DNC chair race, quoting a lot of DNC members saying, we need somebody more centrist. We need the party to move more to the center. That's an argument that it's out there and it's a critique of what went wrong. But again, a lot of DNC members are liberal. A lot of the activists in the party are liberal. It's going to be an interesting fight to see who wins that and who's the face of the party and who makes a judgment about what they can do from the DNC in the minority to reposition the party in a serious way. 3, the finance chair of the DNC wrote a letter to the big donors. You know, the big donors get a lot of attention from the press. They're great sources and they're influential in the party. And a lot of them think they could run a presidential campaign. They're obviously pissed off because we've talked about this the other night with Steve Elmendorf. They were briefed regularly by the Harris campaign. We're ahead. We're going to win this. It's tied. We're going to win it. And so their return on investment was crappy. And they want to know, we gave you all this money and you lost and you told us you were going to win. So it suggests you don't have great data. And a lot of these people are business people who have great data in their professions and they want to know. So the finance chair wrote them a letter saying, we got to get to the bottom of this. We were shocked we lost all 7 battleground states. So again, that's a reckoning because the new DNC chair and the new DNC finance chair, if they're going to rebuild the party, they need these same donors to write big checks in 24, 25, 26. And right now, and this happens after the party, either party loses, they're not in a check writing mood. They're not in the Zelle mood because, or wire transfer mood, because again, they were misled, maybe not on purpose. And then the big super PAC that supported the Harris campaign spent like close to $1 billion on their own, according to the New York Times. And again, people are wondering, was that money well spent? Those donors are wondering it. The activists, the consultants who weren't part of feeding at that trough are wondering, how did we lose with all that money?
All right, let me just stop them there. How did we lose with all of that money? That is the real thesis of like their argument. And it's not really an argument. It's more like a question. I got to add, I spoke to somebody. I got to give them credit. Like people more willing to talk to us, I think, because they lost and they're angry. And so I spoke to a guy in Philly. Everyone knows who this guy is. And they were furious that they didn't get any love from the Harris campaign, not only money-wise, but they didn't get any attention, right? These are the people who get the votes to the damn scanner, okay? And they got nothing. Like, he's like, yo, why don't you cut another check for Beyonce, you dumb bitch? Like, he was so mad. And he's like, I got none of this. We got none of this. Because what comes along with that is like, okay, I'm going to do this for you and make sure the votes get to the ballot box, to the scanner. But in return, you got to kind of listen. And here's our problems. But because they're working class problems, she wanted nothing to do with it. They believed they could ignore that last remnant of the industrial base that you were just talking about. And they exist everywhere, even in urban centers like Philadelphia, right? If you want, by the way, your state is another perfect example, even though it's the West, it's really the mountain region, but it's still the same kind of voter. You want the culinary unions to get your vote to the polls, you have to listen to their concerns. They have to feel somewhat assured that you listen. I know what you say publicly and what you got to campaign on, that's one thing. But don't tell us he's not right about eggs. Don't tell us he's not right about the price of milk. Don't tell us he's not right about the grocery bill, the ability to pay rent, like he's right. So there's no tax on tip shit. If you want us to tell our people why they should vote against the guy who's saying no tax on tips, okay, you got to give us something. And she didn't, because their party no longer really gives two shits about any of that. That's the real truth here. And anyone who disagrees is backward. It's like, if you're not part of the world, their new progressive world, it's always your fault. You're not skilled enough in this. It's not that they have bad policy and they took the country in a direction that the country just doesn't want to go in. My lease is about to be up, Robert, and we try to stay a single car family. And it doesn't look like we're going to be able to do that much longer. And I'm going and I'm talking to the guys. Now, this is about as high end as you get, guys. I'm going to see maybe the guys at Cadillac want my business if my dealership doesn't want to give me what I want, which is just the dispute we're having right now. But I'll go get an Escalade instead of the Wagoneer. You can kiss my butt. This guy's going on and on about, man, I hope Trump ends this electric vehicle mandate, because number one, our company's not ready for it. Our workers aren't ready for it. The consumers aren't ready for it. They just force this stuff on everyone. And then they just think that anyone who has a problem with this stuff being forced on them is backward and wrong. And they just don't care, because in their little world, it's fine. It's fun, but they don't understand it's a little world that they live in. And they're never going to get it, Robert. They just thought, like, doesn't matter. Let me just keep throwing money at the problem. Let me just keep throwing money at it. Keep throwing money at it. It's unbelievable.
No doubt. Excuse me.
And take your time.
And we saw the continued movement of other demographics that we've talked about, whether it's Orthodox Jews and certain Puerto Ricans and other areas.
He's a middle-aged black guy, by the way. At Cadillac, middle-aged black guy.
Oh yeah. So I mean, the populist revolution has been happening and has been an ongoing process. It's probably never had as good an expression in modern American politics as it did in 2020 on election day 2024, because you're not only getting Trump, but you're getting a committed Trump, and that's being reflected in people like Tulsi Gabbard for Director of National Intelligence, Ratcliffe for CIA, who's much, much better than his certain predecessors were. The Matt Gaetz at the Justice Department, the Robert Kennedy taking over the Health Department. These are people like Hexeth coming in, Secretary of Defense. So maybe we'll actually have a Secretary of Defense who knows how to defend the country. That'd be nice. Yeah. And so I think you aggregate those. You're talking about dramatic populist reform is coming. That the reasons why it happened politically are all the reasons we have been previewing it would happen. And then everybody got to see it on election day. Well, I think almost every model right before election day went back to Harris, all but one or two. And they were, again, wrong because they don't actually know how to model an election. So it's not because models are inherently bad. Though out here in Vegas, people are skeptical because everybody's got a model until they're broke. And so that's where that doubt comes from. So we saw now politically the manifestation and a culmination of this, but underlying it all is the core economic and cultural issues that the country's been facing now, that has been on fire in certain directions at different times over the last several decades. And that's what needs radical reform. That's what, that's where Elon Musk and Vivek being involved in just reconstructing our entire federal government and its relationship administratively and bureaucratically to its own people. That needed to be done a long time ago. But now you have two people who are probably the two of the most motivated and two maybe of the more skilled when you look at complex organizations, Scott, at size and scale, to do so. Combined with the big reformers like Robert Kennedy in health, like Tulsi Gabbard in national intelligence, like Hegseth in terms of the defense being reoriented back towards the soldier. These are the best. I mean, Trump in 2 weeks put up more better nominees than he did his entire first term. I mean, to me, that's the degree of turn. He understands it. Everybody around him gets it. More are coming, I guarantee you. There's going to be some great names. And I don't mind your diplomatic neocon type like Rubio being in there, because Rubio's not going to be like Ted Cruz and go off necessarily. He's more, almost like an old school Cuban diplomat, really, when you look at his personality. So I think we combine all of that. It's extraordinary opportunity. What we've seen is extraordinary history. Now we're going to see whether that extraordinary opportunity makes something of it.
Yeah, and I got to tell you, I didn't realize when we did the Four Freedoms poll how much of an impact that was going to have on where we are and how we got here, because he really did hear that and he ran with it. And you cannot tell me, because you looking at the map, looking at where some of these votes are coming from, it came from, which, by the way, like you said before, did not always trickle down ballot. It didn't. They said, all right, look at Trump bringing in these voices here. Look at Trump doing this. He's, look at Trump running around with RFK. Look at Trump running around with Tulsi Gabbard. I know I'm this well-known, I wouldn't call him an ever Trumper, certainly a Trump skeptic. Man, he heard about the RFK appointment and he was like, I'm fully ready to have this guy's baby now. like this, because I don't think he believed it, but they believed it enough to vote for him, and he's making good on those promises. And it's just, it's leaving these people, and this is why I say we can't trust a lot of them. And I'll play another clip here as a perfect example. It's not even a mea culpa. They can't even get a mea culpa out without throwing some sort of blame or insult Trump's way, even though this was meant to be a Trump ass-kissing moment. They can't do it, though, because they're not sincere. They're not earnest. They're just orphaned right now. They have nowhere to go. It's like, I don't know, a gated community in Loudoun County and not a lot of other places. Like, if you look at the map by county, folks, it's astonishing, which I should bring up, actually, how Trump won. No, because it's even worse than it normally is, because he did so much better in urban centers. And we're actually going to map this by county vote share.
We talked about all the way back 2 years ago. So where he's surging is where Democrats are getting divorced. And the Democratic Party just kept pretending they weren't getting divorced.
I remember talking to you too about parts of Detroit and the Michigan poll. And I'm like, damn, Robert, he's at 35% in Wayne County. That's not really possible. Like 30, okay. But if he gets 35% in Wayne County, we're talking about a totally different election. He's at 34% right now. And that's after they counted and trickled in their ballots that they trickle in all the time. And I know a lot of people are concerned about what's going on in Pennsylvania and other places. But Robert and I did warn you guys about Wisconsin, about how they take advantage of that last-minute registration in places like Milwaukee. So you will see something like a 102% return rate. And you'll be like, oh, my God, that's impossible. It's got to be fraud. We don't know that yet, and that's why Eric Hovda conceded, because once they're counted anyway, it's too damn late. You're not going to be able to do anything about it. But chances are that actually it's Democrats getting last minute votes in. I'm not saying they did it legitimately. I'm just saying that they did it legally somewhat, right? Like it's, and if you don't like it, then end the law. But that's the way the law is. So you're giving them the ability to do that. At least they're not bringing them 3-4 days after election day. They're just taking advantage of it right up until that final moment, which is why it comes in at 3:00. But yeah, let me play these two morons after everything they put this country through, talking about hoaxes day in and day out, including hoaxes that got people killed or nearly killed, got the president nearly assassinated. I mean, a quarter inch and his brains would have been all over the stage. I mean, I don't think people understand this. Steve Scalise could have died. He was in very bad shape, and they pushed this crap. All right. Not to mention, a firefighter did die in Pennsylvania. There's a father, a husband, a firefighter, a community leader who will never be around again because of these two asshats pushing this nonsense that nudges people to doing crazy stuff. And of course, no doubt, I'm sure if we were able to investigate it, we would find out it's like the old Malcolm X way. No doubt the FBI or the CIA or somebody nudged that guy to do that. I mean, there's no doubt they did that. In the same way that if we knew who killed Martin Luther King, it would be very simple. To alphabet agency, a 3-letter agency that we would be able to blame if we knew. I mean, come on, give me a break. Hoover couldn't get the guy under control, so he ends up with his brains all over the damn second story balcony at the hotel. All right, so let me run these idiots because I can't stand them. And then I have a flashback video which I sent you. I don't know if you got, but I did on purpose. I'm like, amazing how these people, in the tail of the tape, amazing how they can say one thing one day and be totally different the next. And that's why you should not trust them. They are looking for ratings. Their shows are collapsing. Nobody's watching them anymore. So this is what they did on Morning Joe this morning, which is perfect. I mean, no Sunday show could have made our point better than they did this morning.
Last week, Joe and I have heard from so many people, from political leaders to regular citizens, deeply dismayed by several of President-elect Trump's cabinet selections, and they are scared. Last Thursday, we expressed our own concerns on this broadcast and even said we would appreciate the opportunity to speak with the president-elect himself. On Friday, we were given the opportunity to do just that. Joe and I went to Mar-a-Lago to meet personally with President-elect Trump. It was the first time we have seen him in 7 years.
Now, we talked about a lot of issues, including abortion, mass deportation, threats of political retribution against political opponents, and media outlets. We talked about that a good bit. And it's going to come as no surprise to anybody who watches this show, has watched it over the past year or over the past decade, that we didn't see eye to eye on a lot of issues, and we told him so.
What we did agree on was to restart communications. My father often spoke with world leaders with whom he and the United States profoundly disagreed.
Worst secretaries of state ever, by
That's
the way.
a task shared by reporters and commentators alike. We had not spoken to President Trump since March of 2020, other than a personal call Joe made to Trump on the morning after the attempt on his life in Butler, Pennsylvania. In this meeting, President Trump was cheerful, he was upbeat, he seemed interested in finding common ground with Democrats on some of the most divisive issues. And for those asking why we would go speak to the president-elect during such fraught times, especially between us, I guess I would ask back, why wouldn't we? 5 years of political warfare has deeply divided Washington and the country. We have been as clear as we know how in expressing our deep concerns about President Trump's actions and words in the coarsening of public debate. But
there it is.
For nearly 80 million Americans, election denialism, public trials, and January 6th were not as important as the issues that moved them to send Donald Trump back to the White House with their vote.
All right. It's more than that. And I'm going to stop it real quick right there, Robert, just so we can get into it. This is the stuff. Here we go. So here's this. This is why this is not sincere. This is not earnest. I understand Trump wants everyone to like him. He's got Nixon syndrome, and I get it because he remembers before he was a presidential candidate, before he was president, all of these people loved him. And that's something that I think a lot of his critics don't understand. It must be hard for him to consider how they could turn against him like this. They loved him. I mean, guys, his book is very expensive. I read some of that stuff in the book and out of the book. All right. Like notes. Trump is very good at flattery, and he'll send you stuff, which when he wants you to take something into consideration, he's very good at trying to flatter you. But I have read these messages, and these are like everyone from him personally, her, she did too. Mark Cuban. I mean, these people that like now come out and make him out, call him a Hitler, whatever, kissing his ass. So it must be so hard. And speaking to him like that his friendship is like cherished by them, and then it's disgusting how they act. And so it's like she still doesn't get it. It's not like election denialism wasn't as important as the issue. No, Mika, they know you're full of shit. Your party right now is in Bucks County counting illegal votes that a court has now twice ruled is illegal because you refuse to. You're a denier. You're an election denier. You refuse to acknowledge that Dave McCormick beat Bob Casey. All right. When you lost in 2004, you were election deniers. You refused to acknowledge it. You did challenge it in Congress. And you even had some guy pretend he was an exit pollster and write a report basically saying it was statistically impossible for George Bush to win Ohio. It's amazing how people forget this stuff, Robert. Let's also not forget they refused to acknowledge that Norm Coleman beat Al Franken, and they kept that going for a week until they found a bunch of ballots in a truck everyone knew they filled out over the weekend. All right, they were going to steal Florida from George W. Bush in 2000. It was only until Republicans physically broke the door down in Miami-Dade. People really, I mean, I'm old, I'm showing my age. A lot of younger people probably don't remember this, but obviously a lot of Americans did. And obviously a lot of Americans just didn't believe you, bimbo. They didn't believe you. By the way, Joe, I hope you watched your wife during that meeting with the president. All right. You may keep her on a leash, man. You don't want to let your wife out of your sight too long with the Donald. I'll tell you that much. I bet you that shit will be over before you know it. Anyway, I mean, so like the point is, this guy has said the most awful things. His wife has said the most awful things. And now they want you to think that they're like part of the solution. Why wouldn't we? We said, I don't know. Your daddy almost started World War III, almost started a nuclear war because of the non-communication policy. So like, you don't seem to learn any lessons your damn self. And I got one more clip, Robert, real quick. Just one more, just as a joke. It's now making its way around Twitter, and I should never have given it to somebody because obviously now even Alex just posted it. Damn it. All right. So I was trying to save this, but next time I'll know better. This is Joe Scarborough years ago with someone that may look a little familiar to you.
Born in 1991, has a slight form of autism called Asperger's. But it seems, and again, when I was practicing law and also when I was in Congress, parents would constantly come to me and they'd bring me videotapes of their children, and they were all around the age of my son or younger.
The generation,
so something happened in 1989.
Exactly. The generation, what happened was the vaccine schedule was increased. We went up from receiving about 10 vaccines in our generation to these kids received 24 vaccines. And they all had this thimerosal in them, this mercury, and nobody bothered to do an analysis of what the cumulative impact of all that mercury was doing to kids. As it turns out, we are injecting our children with 400 times the amount of mercury that FDA or EPA considers safe.
I just got to stop right there because, man, shall I go back to the tail of the tape, Joe Scarborough, just 6 months ago, and what he had to say about RFK and his a vaccine denialism, his anti-vaxxer stuff. Here he is with a parent who has a child, slightly autistic himself, blaming vaccines for his son's autism, blaming vaccines for son autism. And ironically, the author of the book that's on the show isn't doing that himself. He's simply saying we never took an analysis of what the cumulative effect of all this mercury has been on these kids since we ramped up the schedule for vaccines. That's what he was saying. Joe's the one who took it to, oh yeah, those vaccines poisoned my kid, and that's why he has Asperger's. Meanwhile, you could look 6 months ago, folks, 8 months ago, and you could see Joe Scarborough like righteously going after RFK as a vaccine, an anti-vaxxer who's made all of these ridiculous, unsupported claims about the effects that vaccines have on the development of children, including whether or not they cause autism. It's just, but the reason I show everyone this, Robert, is to show the duplicitous nature of these pieces of shit. Like, they are the worst of us. The worst of us.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's still going to be the hurdle, is that the degree to which, you know, we've talked about ways in which the institutions of representative government have a trophy due to scale, you know, how things have scaled up over time, and the probability any ordinary voter has actually met their own representative is pretty low. Just an average kind of, but that gives it a sense of it compared to the past. And then you have as often talked about, how the direct election of senators really worked. Was removal of the legislature's ability to hold senators to account and provide for any basically right of recall within the Senate structure, which arguably was the whole point of that provision being there in the first place. But once that's removed, all of a sudden, essentially we've had this century plus experiment by professional class elites throughout the Western world, and they disguise it as different things. They might have called it some sense of community and fascism with in Italy or Spain, or the National Brotherhood of Socialists in Germany, or actual communists in other parts of the European world. But you look at what sort of was being unleashed during that time frame and how revolutionary it was for the world. Politically, that we're seeing that our elites misgoverned, whether fascists failed, corporatism failed, communism failed, all forms of statism have now failed. And to some degree, our own constitutional governance is entirely dependent on the capture problem. In other words, assuming that it's easier to corrupt somehow 150 million plus people than it is to corrupt a few hundred members of Congress. Because now we're going to see the next wave. I mean, there's going to be less pretext. Now, the GOP establishment is nowhere near the power that it had when Trump first came in. I think, is that a fair conclusion? In terms, I think what he's fighting the administrative state, the deep state national security apparatus, and he's fighting the old school political establishment on both sides.
Yeah. And I think, Robert, the thing is, like, this is something. Let me see. The easiest way, and Laura and I were trying to figure out the easiest way to explain this to people, because we always hear things like, because he is fighting his own too, like Mitch McConnell, and now apparently he's walked it back, but he was saying, there will be no recess appointments, and this one's not acceptable, that one's not acceptable. And Laura and I constantly hear this stuff from people like, how is it, Republicans don't object to a single radical Obama appointee. They don't object to a single, radical Biden, any Democratic appointee. They get the governments that they want, right? And every time there's a problem with one of their nominees, someone like a Lindsey Graham will say something like, the president's entitled to have their cabinet. The president's entitled to have their government. But the same is not true for Trump. And I guess the best way, because of what you just said being absolutely true, the best way people have to understand this is that the Republican Party is like acting like a minority opposition party because they are not the favored party of the state. All right. And this is how DC is. And it's always going to be easier if you are the favored party of the state, which is currently the Democratic Party. And that's not always been the case. It flip-flops here and there, but that's the case now. And so the administrative state with the bureaucracy, all of it, and then the parties and the institutions, they all come together to fight the thing that threatens the status quo. And when you're in the minority party, that's not the favored party of the state in that town, then you're just going to have a bigger issue. Like all of a sudden, there are all these op-eds. If Kash Patel is the director of the FBI, it's going to be mass walkout. It's going to be this problem. It's going to be that problem. And someone like a Lindsey Graham or somebody cares now, or someone like a Mitch McConnell, all of a sudden they care about that now. And it's no longer about whether or not the president deserves their own government, their own cabinet. That's like a product of that fight that Trump is having. It's a product of the system. And then that's really the best way you put it. Like, we wouldn't have these problems if the 17th Amendment wasn't there, because of course the states would be doing the bidding of the people who just voted for Trump in their states. They would care more about that in the state legislatures than they would about the problems and issues that McConnell is concerning him with, which is all the interest of the rent seekers and the bureaucracy and everything that makes that town, TikTok every day. And that's a problem, man. That's a real flaw with the system. And yeah, eventually, I think you're right. The establishment is weaker than it was for sure. This is not 16 anymore. And I'm telling you, I know, folks, like, rest assured that Team Trump is not handling this the same way. I saw both times. And I remember the Mayflower Hotel. President-elect Trump, after he wins in 16, He goes and meets with Paul Ryan. He goes and meets with Mitch McConnell. They're hanging out the Mayflower, and he's like, they're saying, we're going to show you the ropes. We know you don't understand the place. And he's like, look, my main concern, we can go through things, how you guys do it, and you guys can handle the ins and outs. This is your town. I get it. I get that. But my main thing is we got to get the wall up, guys. We got to get better trade deals. And he's like, all I want to do is make sure I keep those promises. And they're like, oh, yeah, sure. He walks away, and they laugh at him. They laugh at him. Okay. And they're like, this stupid bastard thinks he's getting a wall. Like, that's how it was. I kid you not. Anyway, that's not the case this time. Now Trump is like, I do know how this town works. I don't like it, and I don't give a shit what you think, and this is what I'm going to do, and you're going to get in line, or you're going to, as Byron Donalds told somebody, you're going to get rolled, all right?
Yeah.
Like, we're going to roll you, and that's it. It's a totally different thing.
I think, I mean, the way I would think of it is like if we were advising a third world government that had some recent PR problems in the World Court of Public Opinion, and their economy was in one way, shape, or form tied to it. We would come in and give advice that's relevant to all of that landscape. Mm-hmm. In terms of what is both what has happened and what is likely to happen. But I think you look at all the fundamentals had transitioned to this side. The thing I think that you're highlighting that's so many of them have not consistently, not only did they not, of course, see it happening until after it happened, but once again on that side of the aisle, but that they don't understand why, and then that becomes okay. How does this work out in the court of public opinion? How does the court of public opinion ultimately is it going to interface and impact with actual shaping of opinion, as you've talked about? There's ways in which that happens on multiple perspectives. I mean, is it a coincidence the Biden administration decides to charge the poly market guy the day after election?
Right.
Because they didn't want him promoting an independent political new market that could that could challenge the narrative. And poly market was the first one to go up and say, you know what, all these models, they're wrong. If you believe in them, come in and bet. And at poly market, the biggest traders there identified Trump as being a bigger advantage than anybody in the modeling world ever did during this cycle. And so it was a critical, it's why they waged war on him. It's why Cauchy had to file suit to even get the right to do it, all that jazz. And then everybody was, hopping on an election night, and people, while my brain was still functioning, I was just at Sports Picks putting out, okay, if Nevada goes to underdog, buy, those kind of things. Because, Nevada went to like 44, 40.
It did. It did.
I was like, every year, how is it like, I'm looking at this data and I know this is a disaster for Democrats in Nevada. And they're looking at the same data and they've spun themselves into this narrative. I mean, everybody knew Ralston was basically saying we're toast for basically a week. He was just going to figure out a way not to say it. And then he's like, well, for Kamala Harris, she just lies all the time. So I'll do the same thing. I'll just, just make up a new claim.
I'll just make up a totally new benchmark that I've been citing for 2 weeks. I'm going to throw it out, and I'm going to make up a totally new claim.
I mean, still, you can go back and look at Nate Silver. I mean, if there's a gold standard of predicting elections, it ain't Nate Silver. And you go back to what we talked about, in July, right after Harris got subbed in, and the prediction was Trump 50%, Harris 48%.
Yep,
about 150 million or so votes. That Trump would break 75 and that Harris would not get near 81. And all those numbers, those like bing, bing, bing. I mean, right now we're heading for almost exactly within the bandwidth for all the numbers that we put up and predicted, which shows the potential of election markets. I mean, the U.S. election market this time, some people estimated as much as $1 trillion traded hands related to it. In just the election prediction markets or the Wall Street derivative markets. So it'll be interesting to see how all this comes together. Then under the hood, here's the two trends we're also seeing. One, a little bit more delinking. And Trump was carrying people before. We talked about it, that people closed with Trump.
Yeah.
And as long as Trump did well, he could carry him across. He almost did carry almost all of them across. So that was correct. But the more of the drop off, like this, because, and I think it's because of who this voter is. It's not the same 2016 drop off voter between Trump and the Republican ticket.
No, it's not. Yeah.
It's a younger, traditionally Democratic voter who, by the way, because, the Democrats had if they'd been really smart, they would have made sure Kennedy was on the ballot and boosted Kennedy in a bunch of places. It would have helped them down ballot. They might have even stolen back the House, but they can't think ahead to save their lives. They sacrifice people. Look at Tulsi Gabbard. She was always a natural star from a political perspective. And it's like they made her run from being a Hawaii Democrat into a traditional conservative populist Republican. Now, her father was one, and so there was always a unique history there.
Yeah.
Well, with that, but still, it's like, so I think they kept telling us, oh, you guys are underestimating it. They're just going to steal it. Said that was doomer talk. They needed to get it close on election night. We told you how close on election night. And they weren't there on election night. I wasn't here to let you know I was out in La La Land. Trying to discover the source of pain and truth, which back pain will do to you. But golly, but if I was sitting there, I was watching.
God bless you, man.
It feels like a decade of work. But what we explained it, I think, better than anybody. We predicted it better than anybody. We forecast it better than anybody. If you wanted to make money on it, you've made a lot of money over the last 10 years, a lot more money than you've lost betting on our predictions, whether in the election markets or just the over everyday markets. And now there's the opportunity, so that if you share some of the ideas that the Trump reform movement represents, which I do, you see the best opportunity ever. Right,
Yeah.
You're feeling like the old school conservatives around, Reagan coming in 81. Now the savvy ones, knowing that because Poppy Bush was there, this was going to be a long uphill battle to get any Reaganism through the Reagan administration. People don't know how often Reagan told his generals to shove off, but and I think we need, that's what one of the things I really did like was whoever putting out. By the way, we're probably going to look at some generals, a list of generals, to see how many of them should be court-martialed for seditious conduct. And they just dropped this in the middle of a bunch of stuff. Like all this other stuff's going on. So the DC is going to wage war on Matt Gaetz. That's how you'll know he's the real deal, because they always tell you who matters, because they'll scream about them the most.
The loudest and the most, man, every time.
If you didn't know who Robert Kennedy was before, you became fascinated with how well he was demonized. You're like, who is this guy that he can be like Satan and the devil in the same, the Nazi and the communist in the same hand? But I mean, the way he has handled this politically, Tulsi Gabbard. I mean, we ran into a lot of skeptics. Remember skeptics about J.D. Vance.
I remember it like it was yesterday.
It's a disaster barn. I had people calling me up saying, you got to get Trump to dump JD off the ticket. It's like I was one of the people screaming for him to be on the ticket. And that he was key to him. And then we never heard a whisper from the NRO crowd once that debate happened, because he's the best combination of accessibility. He's our first millennial president.
First millennial vice presidential nominee, and now the first millennial vice president ever. And by the way, I just want to bring up that we were the first ones, I believe we were the first and only ones to have Vance his image to hit in our polling because of the coordinated attack on him. But in our first poll, he started positive. And you and I said, these attacks will not last. People are going to watch Hillbilly Elegy. It's number one on Netflix for 2.5 weeks. It's been on Netflix for years. What do you think people were doing? They were saying, you know what? Shut up, media. I want to learn about this guy myself. And then the debate was it. I mean, I'm telling you, I got calls from gay guys who were like, you were so right. I love this guy. He's dreamy. And I'm like, he broke through. That's it. That's the moment. And his favorability image ended in our poll +2. And so reversing this huge negative. It ended +2, and I bet you if I polled right now, it would probably be +10 or more. I guarantee it. And Waltz, he ended negative. And every one of those polls showed the opposite, Robert. Look at the exit polls right there. There it is. View of J.D. Vance, favorable 47, unfavorable 46, so very close to ours. A little bit less favorable for him, but that's hell. It's Edison research. What do you expect? And then view of Tim Waltz, favorable 45, unfavorable 47. I mean, like, identical almost. And people saw not what they wanted to see, because that's not true, because you know JD and I know JD. We know him. Other people don't. They're absorbing what they get through. That is JD. He is that good of a guy. He is that cool of a dude. He does understand and care about those issues. That he's not lying. It's not a trick, so it came through. It broke through all of that bullshit. It broke through, and people were calling us like, good job, guys. Look what you've done. All these freaking neocons and scared rhinos, right? Look what you've done. He's going to sink the ticket. Okay. And Robert and I were like, he's the best vice presidential pick for a Republican in your lifetime. Shut up and wait. And there it is. There it is. So go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just got to point that out, man.
Yeah, and so you have in the people around Trump and the people Trump is putting there the ability to deliver a set of policies and enforcement that could be lasting and needs to be if we're going to get the kind of systems.
Yeah,
we've needed a recheck and a clear out for a while. And this provides an excellent opportunity to do so. Hopefully we utilize it. Trump is going to maximize every opportunity for it. But on the flip side, we have sort of the institutional lagging issues that where you see what is clearly a populist moving election. And then you get, and then the debate within the Senate, who's going to be Senate Majority Leader is going to be Schmuck A or Schmuck B, or maybe not Schmuck this year C. It just tells you how bad we're at. That they didn't right away and say, you know what, Mike Lee's turned out to be a very popular conservative Senate representative the last 2 years on social media. Let's think about using him. Nope. And I mean, here's the other thing, Mitch. You can tell some of those people in D.C. are so accustomed to things doing and going a certain way that he thought he could start rolling Trump again.
I know.
He doesn't understand.
He doesn't get it.
That game has truly sailed. I mean, when back-to-back days, he puts out Matt Gaetz for FBI and Robert Kennedy at state, and the
Tulsi Gabbard is the
Tulsi
director
Gabbard
of national
coordinating
intelligence.
all the intelligence everywhere, and what everybody's doing. That tells you how McConnell's so used to doing whatever he wants. He doesn't even know why he has the power he has. That it's that level of kind of disconnect is the sense that I'm getting. And I think that's our biggest, for those people that want real change, it's all the completely inept institutions in Washington that are a greater long-term threat. The greater short-term threat are these institutions of influence right now in the deep administrative state apparatus. But the next level of threats that Trump needs to find hopefully a way to deal with is to just reconstitutionalize the American government. Is the easiest way to get there, and restore more power to individuals as best as possible, and whenever you have an option or an alternative.
Yeah,
and you pursue immigration as a failed experiment. Quit trying. So I think those are the things the elite should be listening to. But instead, imagine if you were in the UK. I mean, you're stuck with your Tory leadership sucks, and your Labor leadership sucks, and your Liberal Democratic leadership sucks.
You have nothing.
Your only hope is that someday the Reform Party gets back up or just keeps surging. But the elites failed us. Populism is not born. Populism is some terrible disease or anything else. It's the root of American political theory. It's that the ordinary human conscience might have as much a right to say as anything about religion, politics, material life, or to provide for their well-being and their children's well-being as anybody else, simply because they're a human being, not because somebody gave them a special designation on a badge.
Yeah.
And Kamala Harris was the ultimate badge candidate. No, but you don't understand. I got 16 badges. He only got 15. I got 50. He missed the one on the 50. You know that's who her personality is.
Let me ask you too, because like honestly, we're talking about all these obstacles that he and the movement have. Then and I've heard a couple of people bring this up before. I'm curious what your thoughts. Like, it may end up being, let me put it this way, it may end up being the best thing for people who wanted this real change. So I guess the movement, but also the people who may not realize they're not, they wouldn't say, I'm not part of the MAGA movement, but they supported it. And then because they want these things, everything from freedom from the administrative state, health freedoms, medical freedoms, censorship, or really just freedom of speech, right? All of these things that they may have championed, and he's going to try. He's going this is not going to be chipping around the edges. He's obviously coming at this thing hard. It may end up being the best thing ever that they did what they did in 2020, that they fortified that election because the institutions were stronger, right? They were stronger and people weren't really primed as much as they needed to be primed. That's why there was the whole idea of the seasick voter, because the people, the mentality, the country's mentality wasn't there yet. I told people 16 when he won that I'm a little bit afraid that people don't understand what that change looks like when you try to implement it. And I feel like now they do. That's number one. And number two, because they do, I mean, this kind of goes hand in hand. All of those institutions that stand in his way, they have no credibility anymore. Once upon a time when somebody in the CIA said something, people gave a shit. When the director of the FBI said something, people gave a shit. When the director of the National Institute of Health said something, people gave a shit. Nobody cares what these people think anymore. They're all negative and underwater. A majority thinks they're all scumbags and they can't be trusted. So now it's they screwed themselves fortifying 2020, Robert, is what I'm saying. They actually gave MAGA a bigger opportunity by doing that. That's what I really feel like. I really do.
And what's fascinating is what we talked about a couple of weeks before the election, because I was curious about you could have one theory that has all the votes being legal, that it was just a very effective way for people that, maybe I'll get, I see it's a line, maybe not. Whereas, okay, all you got to do is fill it out. All right. So and maybe money changes hands, maybe it doesn't, but that, sometimes people connected to political machines have been known to do that. And so the question was, though, at least at some level, without mass mail-in voting, 2020 doesn't go to Biden. And what shocked me when I was looking at all these review people, I mean, you talked about them doing way too much copium to a degree that they were not going to be prepared at all for any kind of letdown, despite Harry Enton's sporadic every other day. Oh, by the way, she really has no
turned
chance
into a total. Now it's confirmed to me with that little video we did about Trump's actually didn't win a very resounding victory. The memo went out among Democrats to focus on the fact that Trump is now below 50% majority. This is now the third time Harry Henton has done a segment on the memos Democrats are sending out, which tells me, Harry, you're a memo bitch. And now everybody knows it. You're not a legitimate election forecaster either. Enton's aggregate, I wipe my ass with it. You're a 16-year-old who looks like he just got out of friggin' high school yesterday. I don't know what the hell you're even doing on CNN, but you failed at telling your viewers where this election was going to go because you're nothing but a memo bitch. And that's what I think of you from this point on. I used to once respect the guy. He's a memo bitch, bro. Every time David Brock puts something out, Harry's going to do a segment about it. Is that the way this goes? Come on, man. He's a memo bitch.
I mean, there's a bunch of people who they gave up the ghost in terms of any credibility down the road. 3 elections in a row now, so all the excuses are finally gone. It's striking to me that they were still making them. Oh yeah, no, the past election polling issues all solved. And I was like, well, can you point to objective evidence of that? And no one ever could. And so the polling industry has been exposed for what it is. And it's great that people, like the dear Iowa pollster, are finally exposed for probably who they always were, right? You could click, underneath the hood, you saw a lot of evidence that for many years that she was manipulating the polling data to favor Democrats, because all you had to tell me is who's Republican or Democrat.
Yep.
Is it on the eve of the election or not? And if you tell me those two things, I could tell you that her polling result would overstate the Democrats' margin at that point in the polling cycle. They're never caught for that because they were like, well, the election never actually happened that day. It's always that routine. But basically, finally outed for who she was, because it was so blatant in that sense. And she's like, there's no relationship, by the way, to me stepping down from the future role of being a public pollster in that poll at all. But I guess she finally did put out crosstabs of some sort.
Yeah,
but she didn't care. It was obvious when she was lying about her own poll, which we both pointed out independently.
Yes. She's lying.
She was telling people her poll met this media narrative that the poll did not. The poll met a media narrative of Trump behind in the Midwest. It did not meet a media narrative of younger abortion voters driving Midwestern election. That was actually not there at all.
Which was not in the data. And by the way, that's the thing. I mean, we obviously had it from the jump. When I brought it to the guys at Real Clear Politics, I think it was Thursday night. And I said, listen, I just got to tell you, I just had the Seltzer poll leaked to me. And I'm telling you, it's going to have Harris up. By the way, she tweaked it on Friday because it's slightly different than what I have, which tells me she knew that I got it. And she tried to change it to make it look like I didn't really have all of the information and whatnot. I'm just going to say, I mean, look, Robert, going back before I even bring this up and give you their reaction. This is a long time coming. This is nothing new with Ann Seltzer. She hasn't been the gold standard in Iowa for years. In 2020, they spiked the poll at the behest of the Biden campaign. That poll was leaked to me and Mike Cernovich. Both of us got our hands on that poll, and we were both told the same story, that they're going to say the Pete Buttigieg campaign, they're the foil, that they are going to say that an interviewer didn't mention Pete Buttigieg's name. It really has nothing to do with it. Pete Buttigieg doesn't want the poll out either because he thinks he's going to win, and he did come pretty close, but he was happy to be used as the foil. It was the Biden campaign who was in fourth place and leaned on CNN not to have that poll released. They then leaned on Seltzer, and apparently it didn't take much for Ann to fold, and she spiked the poll because that was not legitimate. And number one, even if the reasoning was true, which it's not, I'm telling you that story is a lie. Even if it was true, it was still not a legitimate reason to spike a poll. We've talked about this a number of times. So people got mad. I'm talking about inside people got mad and leaked it to independent people like me, a polling critic, a well-known polling critic, and somebody like Mike Cernovich, who has a huge following. All right. So that was step one and told me something was already really wrong. Fast forward to the fall of 2020, and you and I are doing the public polling project, and I'm showing everyone Iowa, right? Fox put out their thing in Ohio, and our mind was blown. We're like, no, Trump is like, this is not close. And they had a Biden +3. And then she drops a tie in Iowa when I'm literally showing people that the raw data is Trump +8, minor tweaks, doesn't change anything. I'm literally showing people that I have to weight this. I have to manipulate the data to get Biden anywhere near 4 points, let alone a tie. So I already knew Ann Seltzer was full of shit back then. All right. Now we go through. I know that she's withholding a Trump +19. She withheld that just so she could later use it to help George Stephanopoulos and Jake Tapper, who helps pay her bills, by the way, just so she could help Jake Tapper push Biden out of the race and give the false impression that Harris would have been stronger than Biden, et cetera, et cetera. That's not polling. That's propaganda. And then they only release a poll they denied they had. You remember? They denied they had it. And folks, use your heads for a second. I'm not going to out anybody, but let me just put it like this. Use your heads for a second. How I kept getting this information. Think about how I kept getting this information and why. Because people for a long time now have been questioning Ann Seltzer's fitness to be the pollster for the Des Moines poll. And they can't do it because every time they do, by the way, the Des Moines Register endorsed Trump still. Every time somebody may take it over to the DMR and be like, listen, I got concerns about Ann's ability to remain impartial, they would be fired on the spot for it because she's got this image like, she's still wearing a fucking chastity belt or something. She's scum and has been for a while. The last one that I found out about was because she was, I don't want to say too much. She was telling people about these results in a way that is inappropriate. All right. It was very clear. She was calling Harris surrogates. She was calling Democrats, operative Democrats, and activists and surrogates that she knew were going to be on TV to make a certain kind of a narrative about women in the Midwest and Republican women and abortion, blah, blah, blah. This is not legitimate behavior for somebody who's supposed to be a gold standard pollster for this well-renowned poll that everyone looks at a couple of days before the election. When I told RCP about this, look, I got it leaked to me, getting full circle now here, folks. They didn't believe me. They said, no way. There's just no way she would do that to herself. There's no way she could even find that response. Poor Spencer and Emerson. He drops the poll because by that time, I'm sure Spencer knew that the Des Moines poll was going to be crap because I had already told people and it made the rounds. All right. So in the polling universe, when something like that's about to drop, it's like only question is whether you believe the People's Pundit that he knows the Des Moines poll. And of course, none of them have any reason to doubt me. So they did believe me. Spencer was like, you know what? I'm going to drop this 10.5. I'm going to drop this Trump 10.5. He took so much trash all weekend because of Ann and her friggin' bullshit. He took so much trash. Nobody cares about the Emerson College poll. It's crap next to Seltzer. They dismissed him. They smeared him. They do what they always do. So it wasn't just simple like, oh, there's an outlier and it's a miss. Everyone's professional credibility gets called into question, including Spencer over at Emerson College, because of the great Ann, who everyone knows is not what she is being portrayed as, is my point. Like, everyone knew it at this point, and yet it was still allowed to happen like that, Robert, and that's wrong, and she'll get some cushy job. Some I'd like to say that, like, she'll face some kind of accountability. She'll forever be a joke, don't get me wrong, but Democrats are going to make sure that she doesn't land very hard. I mean, this is not, unfortunately, the outcome we all want, but like at least she's gone, and that ability, like somebody else is gonna have to do the Des Moines Register poll. I would suggest Iowa State University, pairing with them. They actually have been doing a fairly decent job. They have misses in both directions, which tells you that that is a legitimate, decent methodology poll, and has, not this like idea, Robert, she's never missed. John Kerry was supposed to win Iowa, according to Ann Seltzer, by like what, 6 or 7 points? He didn't. He lost to George W. Bush. All right. So this idea she's never done this is crazy. The truth is what you said, which is that she's always just been really good at getting Democratic support during Democratic primaries. She's not really been good at getting the full electorate support. Marianne Meeks, by the way, was supposed to lose. Miller Meeks, she was supposed to lose, according to Ann's poll. Well, guess what? She won.
Yeah. Wasn't she not only lose? I think she was down 17 points.
No, she was getting crushed. In the first district, crushed.
Yeah, the first district. Yeah, because the odds went up, and I was like, "Well, hey, why we got good odds on that one?" It's like, "Oh yeah, bingo." It's the same dynamic. I mean, it's so yeah, it'll be interesting. A lot of the bad actors have been exposed. I don't know how much more they can keep up the sort of the niche, what 538 started out to be. I'm not sure where that goes next. The political election markets are going to continue to expand, and Americans have loved to bet on politics for the beginning of our country. So if you look at that history, you look at what's happened recently, you're talking about massive $1 trillion markets. That's all of a sudden a whole different animal in terms of who's looking at elections, studying elections, trying to predict elections, trying to sort of get ahead. You can monetize it in a more direct way than the way most the donor class has to wait around for it. So the other aspect is, what do you make of the increasing, it seems to me, almost divorce from even the aspects of the top of the ticket down ballot, in the sense that that's becoming almost in the same vein. 2018, I get it in the midterms, but now we've seen it back-to-back presidential cycles. Not that in terms of how the turnout breaks and how it works down ballot. So you would have thought you could have had this map in a midterm map. It almost looked more like a midterm map.
Yeah.
From a Senate and House perspective, like that's where I thought Republican. Now, if you adjust just for how Republicans got screwed by the census, Republicans probably have over 230 House seats. By the way,
they should. In the House, that's one thing. In the Senate,
no,
another. I got something to add to that, but
Trump would have his 100+ electoral vote win too, because of where those electoral votes would have been reapportioned.
Yeah, the census, if they correct it, Robert, he doesn't need any of the Great Lakes states. He just needs to take back the Sun Belt and he's a winner chicken dinner. That's it. It's going to be very difficult for Democrats to win the Electoral College in the future if Republicans stick with MAGA. As I was talking with what's Newsmax on Sunday's show. The bottom line is they have got to absorb this agenda, because I really do think that that's the reason for some of the Senate disparity. The House is a different story. It's gerrymandered beyond ridiculousness. The census screwed Republicans. We're dealing with it in North Carolina. The first district should be like R+6 every time, but because of how they twisted it up with a bogus count, they're able to keep 2 seats here that they have no business holding. But the Senate I think is a little different here, brother. I really do. I think what happened, especially in like your state, I think what we're seeing is Trump, we were talking about these different groups. They're non-white, they're younger, right? It was like cool to be a Trump voter. It doesn't mean it's cool to be a Republican. And this is like Mitch McConnell, the sooner he gets his crusty, old, dirty, corrupt ass out of the friggin' camera shot, the better. He's got to go. Not that I think John Thune's any better, but these guys have this like funk, brother, this funk, this slime that is attached to them, and they dirty up everything and everywhere they go, and they have got to get out of the picture, gone forever for good. That is the old Republican Party. This is now Trump's Republican Party, and Trump can help. His coalition would have been more, I don't want to say transposed, but it would be easier to win them if you're a down ballot Republican. And the fact of the matter is, Republicans have given way too many reasons for these way too many reasons for the voters not to trust them while they trust Trump. Look, Mike Garcia, 2022, wins, and he wins by a hair on his nose. John Duarte, that whole clique out there, Michelle Steele, they don't like Donald Trump. They don't. All right. Nobody in the California delegation likes Donald Trump. I love Rick Grinnell and I love Devin Nunes, but they have to stop blowing smoke, and Brian Jack too. They have to stop blowing smoke up Donald Trump's ass and telling this man that these guys are fans of his and are MAGA and are more conservative. They just don't like to, they don't like to wear it on their sleeve. That's bullshit. They hate you, Mr. President. They talk trash about you every chance they get. They can't stand you. And after 22, I said, you guys did not win because of some ridiculous claim they were saying. We have a ballot harvesting operation. We have curing over here that the rest of the country doesn't do. We know how to do it. That was total nonsense. They were benefiting for a brief time from the realignment because of Trumpism. But without Trump being on the ballot and you being synergistic with him, you're cooked in the future. In fact, even with Trump on the ballot, you're all running on borrowed time. And Mike Garcia publicly made fun of me, went on TV and mocked me on Twitter, quote tweeted me and said, is it too early for this to be nominated as the dumbest tweet of the week? Well, look at you now, Mike. All right, I'm sure you'll get a job with Boeing or freaking Northrop Grumman or something. You'll be a rent-seeking scumbag like the rest of them. But you put Ukraine first. And the voters in the Central Valley and the voters in Orange County that are now Trump voters, they're not the white upper-crust country club, golf playing SOBs that you guys are used to hanging out with. And by the way, the Orange County Republicans, I don't know what the hell you paid me for to come and speak to you and tell you how to move the party forward because you didn't listen to a damn thing I said. And now look at where you're at. Garcia's gone. Michelle is gone. The rest of them are going too. The only reason why Duarte, did he survive? Is it over? He did, right? He barely survived, or it's not totally over yet. Oh no, it's not totally over. They haven't called this race yet. He's down in his own home county, 53.2 to 46.8. Trump's up by 7. Merced, all across that district, he's barely losing it, but he's losing it. Trump's up. All right, these were the counties that voted yes to recall Gavin Newsom and Larry Elder all the way. These are getting to be more Trumpy because they're non-white, they're younger, and Republicans are not going to get these people to vote for them just because Donald Trump is their nominee or just because Donald Trump is their president. They can't do what they've been doing, like the going along to get along. You're not the representative of the military industrial complex. You are the representative of the voters of the Central Valley and the voters of Orange County and all around that area. He got his ass kicked in the burbs in Ventura, bro. Not Trump. He's looking pretty. I mean, it's like, why do you think that happened? Because he put them first. You put rent seekers first. You put the military industrial complex first. He listened when they said, I can't afford my food. I can't afford my groceries. You don't give a shit. You print more money, send it over to Vladimir Zelensky so he can stick it up his nose and launder the rest for his personal escape plan when Putin comes in there with a friggin' V2 to ram up his cross-dressing ass. All right. And you give him that money and the cost of everything else goes up for your constituents. That's why you're in this position. And you mock Trump behind his back. Day before the election, Duarte's over there telling people, I don't know what, despite who wins, I'm going to work to the pathway to citizenship. I can't tell you how many Hispanic voters were like, this is the fucking Republican? Like, he thought that was going to give him a boost with these people, Robert. And they're like, oh, well, I might as well vote for Adam because at least Adam will give me food stamps if I get in trouble. Like this is the way they think. Like, they're going to get theirs regardless, or they're going to try because no one's looking out for them. They're not rigid ideologues where they're thinking, well, I believe in small government, so I can't vote for Adam Gray. No, they're going to vote for whoever they think they can get more from. And they don't trust Republicans to deliver the way they trust Trump to deliver for them and look out for them. It's that simple.
Yeah.
Look at them now.
And there has to be more. I mean, and it's the takeover of the political class as a class, press, policy, the polling, you name it, in those worlds has made the problems even worse in terms of, because they failed. The professional class as a class has failed. The judicial branch has not worked the way it should because it's not living up to the standards necessary of a judicial branch to function the way that one is intended to function as. So receded so many levels, and the question is going to be how much the just organically that changes versus how much this old political guard is able to, because like they seemed when Trump won to be like, okay, well, let's go back to our regular routine. And I was like, that's probably a good time for somebody in Trump world to put out, that someone else that's not going to be in the next Trump cabinet is Chow. And that there needs to be an open inquiry like Matt Gaetz used to do. It's the reason why he's partially hated DC.
Yes, it's target of every investigation.
He would put up a member of Congress that it was amazing. It was ever since this guy became a chair of this committee, he's become one of the best stock pickers in that area in the history of the country. He was really impressive.
It's amazing.
Exactly. I mean, but I think there needs to be examples like that. I think they should create like a lawfare committee that's like combination pardon and civil cases. Look at and find high profile cases, because when he pardons everybody on January 6th, media is going to give him as much crap as possible. So make sure to include other people with those groups that, and in particular, find good cases that tell good stories. And in the process of you find that case, highlight it to that particular community. You can also do it to target every community, because every community has somebody who got railroaded by our legal system as it got unmoored from principle over the last decade. And so find some of these good cases that help create institutional reform. Use the presidential power of the pardon that is way underutilized. Nobody uses it until the very end, where the donor class is trying to climb their way in.
Yeah, that's it. Never for
a real pardon. Use it every day. Find a case to pardon every day. Maybe it's a historical case, but there's good cases to say use the presidential power in order to highlight a significant issue of public policy, but also to reinforce your agenda and the need for that agenda in order for that to become lasting, so that it lasts past Trump.
Damn me.
Now, the other thing is, what do you make of battleground states? Like, as we talked about, movie in sync, but like, we're almost in this freeze posture where the closer the election is in a state, the more it's like stops in all of its trends. And
I think that maybe that's, I mean, it depends. I think it depends on that state, Robert. But I think that, you have like a state like Wisconsin, which is so close, even though the country shifts, right? It shifts 6 points, 7 points, whatever to the right. Yet Wisconsin is still neck and neck. I think a big part of that is just like the money it's an obscene amount of money that are dumped into these states. But it's also the ground game too that's impacted. Harris supposedly had this huge ground game. But I really don't think they put it to the work they could. And Trump this time, honestly, got a lot of these normies out. And, I mean, we're not going to get into it, but I could here. Like this, 10x votes, man, is the reason. I'm not taking anything away from Trump, but I'm saying like some people did it better than in others. So Michigan, you could see move the way the country moved roughly. But it's a battleground state. So that movement was less pronounced. But what it really tells you is that like 10x votes chase ballots better than most others chase ballots. All right. They did their job better. Pennsylvania, Elon's, Pressler, they did their job better than some other people did. Look at Arizona. It shifted pretty hard to the right. So Turning Point did a good job, right? I think that there are some states where you can look at the trend and see that it's more organic, like Ohio and Iowa, despite the fake ass Ann Seltzer poll, nobody really believed they were competitive. So what you saw there were just real organic movements without the influence of money. New Jersey, real organic movement without the influence of money. New York, real organic movement. And by the way, I told you, like D'Esposito, and I like Mark, but Mark Molinaro, like my wife and I know those areas like the back of our hand. We were up there. We could see it. Trump or bust signs next to the sign for the Democratic congressman. Like this is something they better address because for some reason, and it's all the reasons we've been talking about, voters don't yet see the rest of the party in the light they see Trump. And that is a major, they need to be thinking about that right now. And every day from moving forward, they need to be thinking, like, what can I do today to reaffirm to the voter that this is Trump's party? This is the MAGA agenda. Like, and unfortunately, that can't happen without a lot of these people getting steamrolled like Byron wants to do to people. Like he gets it. Byron Donalds very clearly gets it from things I understand he's saying. Like he's apparently one of the guys who is in charge of going like, look, we're not losing this coalition because of your crooked ass. Get on board or get rolled. Like, so that's what needs to be done every day from this point out. And the leadership counts, tone from the top counts. But I think that, the impact of money is getting to be, I always hated it. I always felt it was like obscene and way too much. And I think that now it's got us because it's so much. It does have us like kind of what you just said is right. We're like frozen in time here and we can't, like, you can see it on the peripheral. Like New Jersey is going to be a battleground state. If Trumpism is the banner of the Republican Party, New Jersey is going to be a battleground state. Connecticut.
How about Illinois?
That's what I'm talking. That's another perfect example. So everyone laughed at all those segments that Steve had with Black voters for Trump and all these groups that were in Chicago, like the heart of Chicago. Well, look at that man's vote share in Chicago. Look at it. I mean, that's real. And then even in parts of, the rest of the state where Trump once upon a time didn't do as well for a Republican candidate, he did better. He earned some of that back. So yeah, I mean, I think some of it you can just see, look, we got early indications of that kind of like organic movement. We got early indications before all of the votes started being counted, like, with Kentucky and Indiana, Guam, the Marianas Islands, like nobody campaigns in these places, right? So it's just about the natural direction or shifts and realignments that we're seeing. And Guam, for instance, has been shifting to the right, but I don't think anybody expected Harris to only take it by 3 points, right? And then even I know I tell people never to overhype it. I still have an affection for it because I remember when I was very young, like Dixville, Notch, and some of those other overnight counties really did matter, and they once upon a time were predictive. So I still have a part of its special place for it in my heart, but it does not necessarily predictive. This time, though, it did tell us something. It told us that literally people who voted for Nikki Haley in the primary in New Hampshire voted for Donald Trump. And that was like a big thing that blew a hole right in the narrative of the Democratic talking points, right? So all these Republican women and all these that would be the area. That would be the voter. Folks, in 2020, one of the registered Republicans in that town wrote in Michael Bloomberg. All right. So, like, that tells you that things had changed. And it's only a handful of people. It's not a huge sample size, of course, but it's Dixville Notch. And if you know Dixville Notch, it's like Trump is not going to cater and sit and wine and dine voters because there are 10 voters in the damn town. He's not going to wine and dine them to get their votes. That's what people do to those voters in Dixville Notch. They get the best life ever come election time. It's ridiculous. If you want to get smothered, like if you are shameless and you don't care about people trying to bribe your opinion and you want to live it up for like a month and a half out of the year, go move to Dixville Notch, all right? And you will get like Ruth's Chris dinners every night for like a month and a half. They care. It's just unbelievable. New York City. Actually, let me show you that. Here's another perfect example. And again, with what we had talked about all the whole time, Robert, when it came to like Asian voters, the biggest shifts in the 5 boroughs that we saw were in precincts that were Asian, Hispanic, and Black, right? So you can see that, there's a lot of people deriding. I had pointed out this like immediately after the election, that the biggest shifts actually came in urban centers like Los Angeles and New York City and in Chicago, Illinois, and Wayne County, Miami-Dade. These urban centers really were the biggest shifts. And man, Robert, I know you haven't been around to see it, but man, so where is it? Here it is. Let's just pop up there's New York. You guys can see that shift. I just want to pull this up. Not that I'm patting myself on the back or anything, but I'm kind of patting myself on the back. So I show this to Robert when we get it, and I'm like, man, he's going to take Miami-Dade. Because in our polling by region, Miami-Dade is part of the Miami-Dade Gold Coast. And the Gold Coast also includes Palm Beach, right? Broward County is in there. And if you see that is tied, okay, it's actually 48 to 47.6 in favor of Trump. If you see that the Miami Gold Coast region is tied, the most right wing of those 3 is Miami-Dade. So it meant in our polling, Trump was ahead by about 6 points in Miami-Dade. Well, he won it by a lot more than 6 points. So that's why we underestimated him. But, this is something I've been wanting to talk to you about too. I know it's totally off topic, but it's something that's to deal with polling that I identified. The online panels since COVID are inflating third-party vote shares and someone else. Like the text to online and the peer-to-peer phone interviews, just texting with an agent back and forth, or doing it when they tell the agent, I'll just take the link, thank you, right? And they do it online. That was almost perfect. And unfortunately, there are some groups that we still have to reach online. So that's why we got the margins right, but maybe not the vote shares correct, because we would have. Look where and this was an accident, Robert. I didn't do it on purpose. There were third-party people in the Senate. I just forgot to put it on the questionnaire. Admittedly, I forgot to put them on the questionnaire. So it was just Rick Scott and Powell against each other. And look at that. You can see without the third party, it's almost identical to the actual results. With the presidency, where we had the third party, the margins technically right. We had Trump plus 11, but it was Trump plus 13, right? 13 and a half, something like that. But what happened? The third party vote share is too high. It was not 5%. It was like 1%. And that's coming from the online panel. We identified it crystal clear, bro. And I think we'll have to go back and play with some weights and see. I don't like chasing the weights. I think that it has nothing to do with the weights. I think it is that the online panel is probably going to have to be reduced to like 20% of the sample. And the rest is going to have to be text to online. And that is going to be our preferred method going forward, because we were able to reach people, Yeah, this is a question actually, and I know that it's almost time to end it. You know what? Let me take a real quick break actually before I answer that question. It's a really good question about Arizona. But let me take a real quick break, guys, and then we'll do it. All right. Is that cool, Robert? You good for a break? Speaking of making America healthy again. All right. A new dawn, folks, is on the horizon, baby.
Picture this: Trump back in office, RFK takes over the CDC, NIH, FDA. Get ready for a shakeup. RFK himself even posted, the FDA's war on public health is about to end. He's calling out their suppression of treatments like ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, essential vitamins. The timing couldn't be better to introduce the wellness company's emergency kits. They're new ones. They cut through the red tape. Bottom line, the wellness company is the premier source for hard-to-get medications that may save a life. Be prepared for over 30 illnesses without stepping into an urgent care. Ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, the Z-Pack, amoxicillin, even EpiPens, everything you need to take control of your health. Their guidebook outlines common treatments for things like UTI, strep, bacterial infections, even bite wounds, respiratory illnesses, and more. All it takes is you filling out a digital intake form and your kit will arrive in your door in 1 to 2 weeks. Yes, they even have them for kids now. No more sick inconveniences. Order your kit now. Head over to twc.health/TPP. You save up to $40 now and free shipping. That's twc.health/TPP. And I'll tell you what, guys, what's cool about that, save up to $40 off. Now they even got the EpiPen one, Robert. And when Laura and I first got ours, our first one, which was the original one, it was like for the kids. Like, what if they get strep? Some, God knows what could happen. I mean, you got to be prepared for everything. It could be difficult to get antibiotics. Like the Chinese could withhold whatever, man. And, we just don't get antibiotics. This stuff can happen. Well, what was like weird about that though, is that's like, well, that's for the kids. Maybe we'll just whatever else is for the rest of us, and now they can actually make or send you kits that are just for the kids, and you can kind of separate it out, which is cool. All right. Look, this is, and I don't want to keep Robert too long here, guys. 3:38. Usually we'd go over, but it was 4 o'clock, almost 4 o'clock. So let's get through some of your questions. And this one is basically what Robert was talking about. All right. So although Trump won Arizona by 5+, he could not get Kerry Lake to the finish line. What is your analysis? I think that I'll let Robert speak for himself, but this is part of what he was just saying. This is a good state and a good example. Kerry actually did much better with some of these groups that made up the new Trump coalition. She did better with them in 22 than she did this time. And I think, honestly, some of it is the fact that she's been hit with probably over $100 million. If you add the governor's race, including how much Karen Taylor Robson threw at her, you're now looking at a candidate as the product of over $100 million of negative advertising. And neither one of her races, whether she was running for the governorship, that would be the RGA, and now this Senate race, which was the National Republican Senatorial Committee, they never helped her. Not a dollar went to Kerry Lake. Not in either race. Think about that, guys. Ruben Gallego, he's no idiot. But also, I think Arizona, part of it, I got to say, Robert, I think they're just full of shit. Stephen Richer is said things that no public official who's in charge of counting votes should say about another candidate without recusing themselves or resigning. And the bottom line to me is they played with her votes. They did. All right. She was running behind Trump 5 to 6 points, 7 points in different drops. And it was not good. And that was it. And you could see it, which was something Robert and I didn't think was going to happen. However, some of those later dumps when everyone stopped paying attention are just ludicrous. Ruben Gallego is going to get as many votes as Trump. It just doesn't make any sense, guys. Trump is at 1.76. Gallego's at 1.67. I mean, and she did close the gap, but it's like 2.8 now. I don't know, Robert. There's just some weirdness, very weird areas where he outperformed in his hometown. Trump won the drop in that part that includes Gallego's hometown. Trump won at 51-49. She lost at 52-48. So that's actually something you would expect, being that it's his hometown. That's a reasonable separation between the two candidates. And then we were getting some just straight up ridiculous shit, which was just doesn't make any sense at all. Where she's running in Pima really far behind Donald Trump. I just don't. Some of it I just didn't buy, brother. I just don't. And their system is not secure. I'm sorry. Arizona is not a secure system. I don't care. Garrett, I love you, bro. You're an apologist. You're full of shit. You know it, and I know it. Just get over it. All right. So it does not take you that long to count votes because you have a provision for dropping off absentee ballots on election day. So what? So what? So do a lot of other states. It doesn't matter. You have to have your reported totals by 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in the state of Florida. Reported to this, every supervisor of election, reported up and to the Secretary of State. It still doesn't take them that long. It just doesn't make. They don't verify on site, Robert, which allows election workers to do whatever the fuck they want. Pardon my French, but
well, yeah, I mean, if
that
you
is
could
what
draft it, I mean, Florida once again has an election without a hook,
Yep.
without an issue.
Yep.
Since they've tightened down their protocols and procedures, and they use mass mail-in voting, they use a lot of mass early voting, so none of those can be explained.
Yes,
for any turnout disparity. But the other thing, I mean, your point, technically, Republicans are going to have to get good at the areas they haven't historically been good at, which is identifying and motivating the low propensity marginal voter.
Yeah.
Who's going to be, you think sort of working class, Fight Club meme-ish kind of more persona than say Boomer Collins on Fox. I think that's going to need to be a continuous shift if things are going to move in the reform direction. And then what's helping also in the reform direction was you had different groups coming into it for different reasons. Everybody in response to the pandemic didn't like the overreach by government. Then you had people who had been on the front lines for a while, medical freedom, because of vaccine mandate related issues and mandate discrimination related issues. Now another vaccine, but a whole experiment, whole new scale. So you had the medical freedom people step in. Then you had the sort of financial freedom people step in with crypto.
Yeah.
And it's probably been one of the most effective at really engaging a reform-oriented constituency and aligning their economic self-interest behind more political freedom, which I think is going to be also critical for the next Trump administration.
Yeah.
Is to incorporate people from those different sectors and segments in order to be at any level effective at dealing with all the crap they're going to have to deal with from the House and the Senate. Now, I think they can do the recess appointments if they want. So I think this is just Trump sending out a message, get my people through. And I think I'm not a big fan of any of the candidates running for Republican Senate leader, but because I think they're mostly useless in general. But they could prove their greatest utility right now is to prove they could get through Gates and Kennedy and Gabbard right away.
Yep. And by the way, when they start to do those things like champion medical freedoms, like remember folks, the biggest skeptics of the vaccine push and all of that were Hispanics and Black voters, especially younger ones. They were the biggest skeptics. And it was like, oh, Trump pushed Operation Warp Speed. Like people never really understood how that wasn't going to hurt Trump with these people because of course he did in the beginning, and they're not dumb, and they understand that he was trying to get a vaccine because he knew that the state, the blob, the Democrats, all of it, were never going to let the world go back to normal without a vaccine. So he wanted that vaccine. He knew that, all right, and they understood that. The difference was the mandates. And regardless of what all these people who opposed Trump in the primary and supported other candidates, no matter what they said, Robert and I definitively went down the history. Trump was the first one to start speaking out against lockdowns, mandates, et cetera, et cetera. It wasn't even close, guys. Before Easter, the guy was like, the cure cannot be worse than the disease, or whatever he said. It can't be worse than the disease. No, you cannot jab children to make sure that they go back to school. I already gave schools money in the CARES Act to reopen safely according to the CDC standards. So I don't know why we're having this conversation. He was the one who did that first. All right. So, bottom line is, I think too, some of like when you look at like a Carrie Lake, fair or not, because she's lockstep with Trump, it's not fair, but they get the down ballot stain. Like nobody, it's very clear to me that the American people were like, I don't quite trust you guys yet. And that's been the product of years and years and years of Republicans backstabbing Trump,
backstabbing their own voters. They did to Trump when he was president what they have done to their voters for decades, which turned them into Trump voters in the first place, where you just reelect us and we're going to get rid of Obamacare. You just reelect us and we're going to put on Supreme Court justices that are going to overturn Roe v. Wade. You just put us on there and we're going to stop this war and stupidity. You just put us in there and we're going to, and they were full of shit every time. And I could play a clip, I'm not gonna, from the late Rush Limbaugh, who explained this better than anybody. They feel like Donald Trump knows how they feel. All right. So that is just so huge. And remember when people laughed at me when I said that both parties, their actions, especially the politicization of the justice system, they made Donald Trump relatable to a bunch. They made a rich old white guy from Queens, New York, relatable to poor black and brown voters. And the same reason that the working class white voters were first attracted to him, because they felt like, oh, he knows how we feel. He's been the target of this now. They did to him what they do to us. Like, and people laughed at that, Robert. No, who's laughing now? Who's laughing now?
No doubt about it.
Yeah. What do you, I know you've, man, I keep hearing that Kamala ran a perfect campaign. Who's being protected by this narrative?
People who ran the campaign.
People are shitty analysts that James Carville is now having a field day with, because James Carville and some of the old schoolers, even Jim Messina from Obama's campaign, David Plouffe tried to come in and kind of like straddle the line. Now he made a fool of himself. That's why he's off Twitter now. It has nothing to do with all of these people are not leaving Twitter out of protest from Elon Musk. They're leaving Twitter because they're cowards who are incapable of taking responsibility or being held accountable for failures. And they've been professionally and personally humiliated, and they don't want to face it in any public square, whether it's a digital public square or a physical public square. They do what they do best, which is hide like a bunch of bitches. And that's the product of, by the way, and having an artificial aristocracy. This isn't based on meritocracy. It's based on the artificial aristocracy. And the truth is, they don't really deserve where they ended up. Kamala Harris's people have never been good at this. The Democratic Party is run, and the campaigns are run in the modern era by the media. They run the Democratic campaign. These guys, they effed around and found out, man. They thought that was not the case. And, James Carville, Jim Messina, these guys for 2 weeks are like, listen, we're not going to go out there and say how bad it is when we're interviewed, but this is a disaster. The early vote's a disaster. You're about to get your ass kicked. James Carville told them on a Zoom call that they were headed for the worst crushing defeat since he beat Herbert Walker Bush. Blindside surprise beat Bush. It's the economy, stupid. They didn't want to hear James because his justification was, you're not answering the most simple question, which is, how are you going to be different than Biden? That's number one. And then number two, he still has 1 foot, or at least he thinks or wants to, in the normal American world. And he was telling them, get out of the football. Get out of the trans crap. If you're a man who thinks he's a woman, you're not a hero. You're fucking sick. Right? You're deluded. And they got into a huge screaming match. And he wound up blowing up. They cursed him out. He cursed them out. And now he's taking his victory laps everywhere he can, because he knows that he was right. And but it's I don't know, Robert. You think it's kind of like, well, real quick before I ask you that, Trump and other people, 10X is on their radar. Obviously, I don't think as much as they should, but a huge shout out to Tucker Carlson for his shout out of 10X votes, because that blew the system up. He gave a speech in Michigan that Don Jr. was there, and Don Jr. loved it because he's got this connection with hunters, and he loves the hunting community in this country, especially the Great Lakes hunting community. And because he remembers the old upstate New York hunter community too, which the Democrats killed. But it's a big thing for him. It means a lot to him. So he was very instrumental in getting people aware of 10X too. But Tucker makes this shout out during the speech, what gets the media all over, then starts to be Rachel Maddow, guys. Rachel Maddow, Joy Behar. All right. How do I know? Because I'm in charge of the database. They they tried to sign up to mess with the system. Joy Behar and Rachel Maddow, and of course we reject them because we're like, they tried to sign up for Michigan, like, just and we're like, no. But obviously there was everybody sort of caught wind, and they wrote all of these stories about how glitchy apps and unconventional strategies are propelling Trump's get out the vote. This was hugely successful. As soon as I'm able to bring you the data, the target was 1.7 million in the state of Michigan alone. Okay, Wisconsin was a lot less, about 700,000. All right, and then Pennsylvania obviously was the bigger state out of them all. It was about 2.1 million. But then of those, modeling them out where they were more likely than not, meaning 50% likely, like if you get them in the polling booth, you can feel pretty confident they're going to vote for your values. That's the way you got to say it. That's the right way to say it legally. You got to say it legal. All right. Like, you're not supporting a candidate. You're supporting an agenda, which is increased political participation for the advancement of traditional American values. Okay, so Barnes knows, he's a lawyer. He knows what I'm saying. All right. So we knew that if we could get 300,000 in Michigan, right, just 300 of this, then that is the margin, baby. On election day, going into election day, it was already almost 600,000. So it was a huge impact. And when you look at states like Wisconsin, Donald Trump is going to get the most votes out of any Republican candidate ever in the state of Wisconsin. There is no doubt that 10x votes was a huge part of that. In the state of Michigan, Donald Trump is currently sitting at 2.8 million votes. All right, guys, if you go back and look at 2020, for instance, it was 2.6 and a half. All right, so 150,000 more. I mean, it's a big deal. And obviously, what had happened, I mean, there's just like, those are 2 out of 4s. And I think low prop to no prop, I mean, was like somewhere in the neighborhood of 100,000. So like, it's the entire increase. It's like the entire increase in voter turnout. And it's a big deal. So making sure the low props did in fact get there, and the no props, by the way, the beauty of it, Robert, is like that it actually listened to the research. You're not going to cold knock these people to go vote, but their family and their friends will. Their coworkers will get, that is the best way to motivate a right-leaning voter. They will not listen to some schmuck who knocks on the door that they don't know. Hey, you haven't voted in 4 election cycles, but we think you support this one. Go out and vote. Like, they'll close the door in your face. But you use their friends and their family, and you let them get proactive. You put it in their hands. You empower them. You empower the grassroots, and man, it works. And I knew it would. And, very minimal stuff. Texting to follow up, knocking to follow up. I mean, the family's going to do it. Your friend circle's going to do it. Your coworker circle's going to do it. Your neighbors are going to do it. Right. So God bless what Elon did, because he certainly was active. He knocked me like 3 times, so God bless what he did. But I'm telling you, this is the way forward. And if 10X wasn't there, I don't know if Trump it wouldn't have been like this anyway, this size of a victory. Maybe he would have eked it out. I don't know. I'm very, 1.4, no, but it may be a 10,000 vote margin, like that, like 16, maybe, but I don't think you're looking at a 1.4, almost 2-point win rounded. I just don't think you are. I think that's 10x. And God, I'm telling you guys, go to Twitter, go to X, and thank Tucker Carlson, because that shit blew up after he did that. And the media knew it too, Robert. You should have seen the calls. Hello, this is so-and-so from the New York Times. Hello, this is so-and-so from the Associated Press. And we're just like, they're asking me, what do we do? What do we do? I said, nothing. Don't answer. No comment. Up yours. No comment. And that's all we did, So like, that's it. Just don't speak to them. Don't say a word, because all they're doing is fishing anyway. It's not an article in the paper. They're fishing so they can go tell Democrats what you're doing. That's all. Right. So full of shit. So they weren't worth responding to. And sure enough, when we did black them out, Robert, that's when we started getting like, I kid you not, like Drew was so funny. He's like, bro, is this like the Joy Bear? I'm like, is it? Oh my God, it is. The host of The View is trying to sign up right now.
And then lo and behold, I mean, it was tons of them, man. Rachel Maddow was another one. I mean, and then a bunch of reporters trying to sign in to figure out what they could do. You know, they were going to try to mess with the system and claim a bunch of votes, because when you claim them, it takes it out of circulation, and someone else may not be able to go in and motivate that voter to go out and vote, because you don't want to overdo it and overpressure people. So basically we would give them a certain amount of time. If they claimed a voter, like, oh, I know Robert Barnes, let me talk to him, let me try to get him to vote. Then we gave them a certain amount of time to come back and report progress. Like, how is it going? Are they going to vote? If not, if someone else claims them and thinks they can do better, fine. But if you're Rachel Maddow, you know damn well you can go in there and just claim a shitload of people and take them out of circulation for at least 72 hours. You know what I'm saying? So like, they were going in there to manipulate the system. So thank God. And then we had Pennsylvania too. And what did I do? And it's totally legal. I was like, hey, Scott, you want access to a database? He was like, yes. I mean, look, totally within my right to do it. You know what I'm saying? Completely within my right to do it. So I did it, and they were happy. They were more than happy. And it's not being abandoned, which is very, very important. They'll have a really bright future, because it did get the support emperor of a bunch of those people, a bunch of those. So yeah, I think it's important. This one I'm going to give for Robert. One was specifically for you. Oh, can Barnes comment on what Trump can do with the Chevron decision and having a Trumpy AG to remove the power of the administrative state by consent decrees? I mean,
you can take it apart in multiple different directions, but there's no question that funding is a key. You know, you shut off the faucet, then you shut off 90% of the problem. That like you saw with AOC, like discussing policy debates, and you could see what's behind it is she's worried about whether her crew gets the biggest contracts, right? Yep. I mean, she's not really interested in, are we going to promote this union policy or that union policy? That that's not her concern. It's, let's make sure my friend Susie and my friend Lisa, they get their percentage of the pie when the pie is divvied up. You can see that's where the focus is still in large parts of the political class.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yep. And somebody else says that he thinks the Hegseth, Tulsi, RFKs, the Musk, the Viveks, the Gates, they will keep the more pro-war people like Rubio in line. As long as it's heavily weighted like that, I totally agree with what Robert said before, which is like, Rubio.
Trump's always going to do what he's going to do anyway. Trump can honestly push around Rubio relatively easily. That's probably part of where the process of that decision came from.
And it's the State Department, so people.
Well, you know what else I think it means? My takeaway, it was sort of under the radar, because I think if you look at what Trump's been doing, it looks like he's focused on trying to get major peace deal announcement early on.
Me too.
Either in Europe, Israel, or both. But think about where else he could get. He's always wanted to do a big peace deal with North Korea to reduce that threat.
That would be so big.
He was close to it, but for John Bolton last time. But you look around, you know who else it could be? What if he could get Cuba to fold?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, and who better than the Cuban senator as Secretary of State to possibly get that done?
Yeah,
because Cuba's in massive trouble. They could not afford to shut down during the pandemic to prove how great government is, that they could save you from a pandemic, which tells you how stupid all of socialists are by nature. It's almost a self-disqualifying incompetency test. But Cuba's in serious stress level. The Castros are gone in terms of any meaningful, lasting political influence.
Mm-hmm.
In that political environment, a lot of things could happen. And so you could imagine Trump would love to see, he would like to see, I think, peace and health as two big legacies that he's wanting to push through. But he also realizes, you knew he was in the game all the way when he picked Gates for DOJ. Because I was like, who do you pick for DOJ? You could tell he wasn't going to make the same mistake twice.
No.
There was a few of us telling Trump world, do not put Sessions as Attorney General. That he's an old school guy who'll worry about the potheads more than other things. He doesn't believe corruption exists in the Justice Department, so they'll weasel them out and create their own little secret subcommittee.
My
And that's-
friends across the
Exactly.
aisle. Fucking
Correct. And
Keebler
Norm
out.
Eisen went bragging about how they manipulated him behind the scenes without even having an official job. So the Yates is critical. Some of these people are going to be critical to being able to push through the agenda, being able to make lasting reform. And then what ordinary people do. But the best thing about all of this, ordinary people have really woken up. The people who haven't yet are the politicians and the press.
Well, look, there's one thing actually, and I mean, I guess I could play out with it, but I did want to do this because I guess it's, let's see. Oh, I just want to make sure I don't miss anything that's like big. But yeah, look, in Arizona, but also in Pennsylvania, just to get through this one, if Republicans were doing what Democrats in Bucks County are doing, then either the Attorney General of the state would have ordered something to be done here already. And if not, if the state did not hold them accountable, because this is election fraud, number one, and number two, it's a civil rights violation. Okay, so the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department, if the state didn't take action, and this is what should be happening right now, but it's Joe Biden, unfortunately. When Trump becomes president, I have been told, by the way, that these people in Bucks County will pay dearly for what they have done. They are not going to forget. This is what an appropriate use of this is a very ideologically corrupt division. It hasn't been used right. It's filled with a bunch of left-wing lunatics. But this is what it's originally for. This is what Democrats have been doing to black voters in the South and black voters all through the country. This is like textbook Democrat, what they did to Republicans in early voting. Sorry, boy, no more ballots here. Right? Like that's what they do. So Bucks County will be charged with civil rights violations. They should be. And that is an appropriate and perfect use of the Civil Rights Division at the Justice Department. And normally right, Robert? This is exactly what it's intended for.
And there needs to be civil and criminal cases pursued. And
the
original top target of institutional reform for the very original Civil Rights Act, where the judicial branch as a branch, and judges, sheriffs, rogue sheriffs as well. So who used to be appointed by the courts back in the day. But we have a similar dynamic here. The weaponization of the legal system at every level requires as its remedy the Civil Rights Act.
Yep.
And there needs to be particular cases pursued, as well as particular individuals pursued that have committed such flagrant violations that they get the message. There needs to be somebody, a few examples so that the next Anthony Fauci thinks twice before saying, yeah, we need to lock down the world to save it.
Yeah. Let's see. I was going to say this, like, well, how much did you think Trump is going to, or actually, I mean, he already is. I guess my point is this guy like basically the president already? Like, and I'm serious because it's
I think he's coordinating that way. You look at, does a UFC event, but lurking in the background is one of the biggest oil Saudi related royal money.
Right.
And it's like, and Trump's whole premise is in the Middle East is you split the Palestinians from the royals because of both religious dispute between some elements within it and political ambitious disputes and a certain degree of distrust of organizations like Hamas throughout the Arab and Muslim world. So if you look at Trump, is it a coincidence that guy's suddenly meeting with, hanging out with him and Elon at a UFC fight?
Yeah.
It starts to feel like he has a whole plan. Here's how I'm going to stagger my announcements of appointments, and that will handle its own news, and we'll see how that's handling its own path. Whereas I think he has been focusing on, can we do something to structure a peace deal early on? So I walk in, peace deal Middle East, peace deal Europe, peace deal North Korea. So you can tell. I think he's really aflamed in that direction. And then he's going to let Kennedy do his thing in the health area, and that will be, and Gates do his thing in the welfare area, and people in combination of Ratcliffe and Gabbard to really take on intelligence. So it's a different. It's not a world with Mike Rogers and Mike Pompeo, laughing it up and telling Trump jokes behind his back. I wonder if he really thought he had a shot. He was trying to tell people that again.
They tried to get Rogers. They did, though. They tried to sneak Rogers in there. Well, I will give you this if you give us Rogers. And he was like, how about I get what the fuck I want and you can kiss my ass? And that's the right way to do it, because Rogers, for God, like an FBI director, Robert, it would have been the biggest mistake of his administration, and it would have haunted him for the rest of his time in DC. The last thing, I guess, and then we'll boogie here, is the popular vote. They keep counting. Look, this is third world stuff. I know. Do I think it ends up around 1.2? It could end up around 1.2. Right now, the forecast. Right now, it's still at the New York Times anyway. And let me just make sure we have the same as the New York Times. We do. So it's technically still 50 flat if you round, but it's just under. They have it projected to be just under 50 at like 49.8, and it will end somewhere in the neighborhood of 1.2 to 1.6. All right, so that will be actually ballpark of where, depending on the ballot, our final poll was anywhere between 1.2 to 1.7, but 1.7, but 1.7 was our full ballot. So that's really like our thing. Now, ironically, the second to last poll that we did was 1.4. So that ends up being close. I think it was 1.4, maybe 1.2, 1.4. But if that winds up being closer, it is what it is. I'm super happy with the ending of our poll. When Robert's feeling a little bit, better, I'm going to show him what certain people have done in misrepresenting our polling. And we'll go, well, that'll be the topic of another day. But, look, guys, I'm not going to let them get away with that. So the bottom line is everyone's trying to make it out like they're the only ones who knew what the hell was going on, and it's just unbelievable. Like, I cannot tell you how many charity calls I field a week from pollsters, and to have these very same people pretend as if they're the only ones who knew what the hell was going on is unbelievable. They herded North Carolina. Multiple people herded in North Carolina after our poll came out. Trump +3 in North Carolina, or Trump +4. 51.1 to 47.1. They herded back after having Harris up. And multiple pollsters did that because they did not want to be on the ass end of our prediction. So I'm holding my fire right now. We'll leave it for another day. But give me a break. Give me a break. Yeah. All right, tell people. Go ahead. If you got something to add.
I was going to say, I think the range I finished with was 75 to 77 and 70 for him, and 72 to 74. He might get slightly above 77, but basically almost dead to the number.
It really is. I mean, give us a break.
Chase Oliver obviously continues to be a disaster for the Blue Liberty. You may remember Trump was willing to guarantee them a cabinet spot, and he just to sit down and meet. Nope, wouldn't do that.
They're going to be bumped now, Robert. They're going to be disqualified from ballots all over the country, because as one of my most watched, yet what I thought was one of my most boring videos I ever did, was about Robert Kennedy being able to qualify for ballot access. And the only way to do that was to explain on different battleground states. And we even expanded it to Minnesota and others that were not considered battlegrounds, the laws for each state. And for people who watched that video, you may remember that a lot of those states required that in the prior contest, you get X percentage of the vote. Otherwise, you had to do insane things to compensate for that, which makes it very difficult for someone to get on the ballot. And my argument with Kennedy was, if he gets on, it'll be because of his huge volunteer base, which he had, by the way, which he got. But the Libertarian Party has not been very good at this, and they've been relying on getting, above 2% here, above 1% there. Chase Oliver was a disaster, and now he will not. They would be bumped off the ballot in Georgia, for instance, in Arizona. They will have very difficult time getting back on the ballot in those states, which, by the way, dumbest takes ever are all these Democrats with that memo, the Brock memo, whoever the hell sent it out, saying Trump got below 50, so it's not a mandate. It's the third party vote. And because Trump was more popular than Harris, you can actually safely assume
that Trump would have performed stronger in the two-party vote only. And if we, I really think that, Robert. I think third-party vote, without it on the table, Trump would be pretty solidly above 50. Not like solidly, but enough. And she was not as popular as him. So there's no way those voters who have more in line with Trump were going to somehow vote for Harris if those people weren't on the ballot. It's incredible how hypocritical Democrats can be when they make these hot takes, bro. It really is. But yeah, I mean, it's 412. We can boogie. I'll end it with a video from Trump on what Barnes and I were just talking about. He's already trying to broker a deal with the Russo-Ukrainian war. And that's because of Biden green lighting Ukraine to use long-range missiles over the weekend to strike Russian targets. Trump knows what that means. That's going to result in a major escalation. Putin is going to wreck Kiev if they do that. And it's going to be awful. It's not going to result in anybody winning. They're going to lose anyway. It's just going to result in more civilians dead and more like infrastructure in a once, I wouldn't call it first world country, but I mean, like, not awful. It will be thoroughly a third world country by the time Putin's done decimating it if they do this. So Trump is putting out a call saying, call me. I'm the president anyway. Let's be real. I'm the president. Call me. We're going to work this out. Don't let these idiots, goad you into escalation. That's what he's doing. It's an incredible video. I'll show it to you in a second. But yeah, tell everybody, Robert, where to find you, what you're going to be up to.
Sure. Yeah. So we post all of our political predictions as well as other sports betting markets predictions, and things like whether the Federal Reserve will raise rates and stuff like that. At sportspicks.locals.com. This past election, basically, people on average either increase their bankroll, their investment by at least 50%, or in some cases had profits of tenfold or higher.
Oh,
so
man.
It was a very, very profitable for those that were subscribers over at SportsPicks.
Yeah, we got a lot of comments, man, immediately after the election while you were recovering. Immediately, like, thank Robert. I made $1,000 on this. I made this much on this. I mean, I was like blown away. Laura was yelling at me during the show. She was yelling in my ear, and I'm like, shut up. I cannot concentrate with you yelling at me. And she's like, why don't you gamble? And I'm like, a wife who yells at her husband for not gambling. I cannot believe this. She's like, but you literally could make a fortune because you know what's going to happen. Like, you can make a fortune when the other people don't know that Trump is going to do X number with black voters, or when they don't believe it because they don't see it. Like, why don't you do this? And I'm like, I just don't. I feel like it would be unfair, Robert. Like, I release a poll and then place a bet. Like, isn't there some kind of law against that or something? Or
exactly. One of the bets that we won was Iowa.
For Ohio.
Iowa.
Somebody made like $2,000 on Ohio or something.
Yeah, it was just that for Trump to win by 5 or more was paid out plus money, and that went up even more after Seltzer put out a bogus number.
Yeah,
her bad seltzer.
And somebody made I can't remember how much. It was a good amount, and it was on Moreno by 3 or more, Bernie by
hundreds
3
of millions of dollars in the European markets and a bunch of places. So, and then I remember a bunch of Trump fans are now crypto people and vice versa.
Yeah,
crypto is also skyrocketing.
Yeah,
because Trump was seen as defensive and protective of crypto.
He
continues to make moves in that direction. That's what might start to unite the sort of blood and bone and brain of a future young Republican Party.
Could be a dominant coalition, the likes of which this country has not seen since Roosevelt put together the New Deal coalition. Like, it could be huge. Yep. All right, Robert, I'll let you bounce, brother. Thanks for doing it this week, man. I really appreciate it. Everyone else does, no doubt, as well. Get some rest. I'm going to get some myself, man, and I'll talk to you soon, all right?
Cool, man.
All right, Robert Barnes, everybody, sportspicks.locals.com. Don't forget, if you like the videos, don't forget to like them and share them far and wide. The links, of course, are in the description for all our sponsors. Today was the Wellness Company. All right, and Farmer Bills, by the way, you will not be let down if you try that biltong. I'm over the moon with this stuff now. The link is in the description, but I had no idea BlackRock and China, we're all up in our beef supply like that. Support people who support American ranchers, farmer bills, links in the description for all that. Here's the video from Trump. Listen to what he says. It's just remarkable to see a president-elect. Of course, we've never seen this because he's a former president and they know he's coming in. But remarkable, we have to see the president-elect of the United States make a public video where his audience is not just the American public. It is the leaders of two foreign nations currently in conflict, in war with each other, have been. And he's coming out because he's basically said there's nobody running this country. It's rudderless. Who is stupid enough to give the Ukrainians the green light and the hardware? I mean, they got that hardware from us to give them the green light to use long-range ballistic missiles against Russian targets, hitting Russian targets. Unbelievable. So here's Trump trying to prevent World War III before he even gets in office. I'm going to bounce. I'll see you guys on Inside the Numbers. And of course, I'll even see you before then on Locals. And don't forget, oh my God, don't forget, somebody make sure this man is covered at all times. All right. See you guys soon. All the best.
Never been closer to World War III than we are today under Joe Biden. A global conflict between nuclear-armed powers would mean death and destruction on a scale unmatched in human history. It would be nuclear Armageddon. Nothing is more important than avoiding that nightmare. We will avoid it, but we need new leadership. Every day this proxy battle in Ukraine continues, we risk global war. We must be absolutely clear that our objective is to immediately have a total cessation of hostilities. All shooting has to stop. This is the central issue. We need peace without delay. In addition, there must also be a complete commitment to dismantling the entire globalist neocon establishment that is perpetually dragging us into endless wars, pretending to fight for freedom and democracy abroad, while they turn us into a third world country and a third world dictatorship right here at home. The State Department, the defense bureaucracy, the intelligence services, and all of the rest need to be completely overhauled and reconstituted to fire the deep staters and put America first. We have to put America first. Finally, we have to finish the process we began under my administration of fundamentally reevaluating NATO's purpose and NATO's mission. Our foreign policy establishment keeps trying to pull the world into conflict with a nuclear-armed Russia based on the lie that Russia represents our greatest threat. But the greatest threat to Western civilization today is not Russia. It's probably, more than anything else, ourselves and some of the horrible USA-hating people that represent us. It's the abolition of our national borders. It's the failure to police our own cities. It's the destruction of the rule of law from within. It's the collapse of the nuclear family and fertility rates like nobody can believe is happening. It's the Marxists who would have us become a godless nation worshiping at the altar of race and gender and environment. And it's the globalist class that has made us totally dependent on China and other foreign countries that basically hate us. These globalists want to squander all of America's strength, blood, and treasure, chasing monsters and phantoms overseas while keeping us distracted from the havoc they're creating right here at home. These forces are doing more damage to America than Russia and China could ever have dreamed. Evicting the sick and corrupt establishment is the monumental task for the next president. And I am the only one who can do it. I'm the only one that can get the job done. I know exactly what has to be done.
Actually thought it was a different video, but you get the point. I'll see you guys soon. All the best as always. Thanks for watching. Wrong clip. What can I tell you? That's why you should be producing instead of me. Deuces!